Story 1. The last watch I've done night security for 10 years, and for most of that time I've worked at St. Jude's Hospital. It's an old place built in the 1920s with a newer wing added on in the 80s. The oldest part of the building, the original wing, is mostly empty now. It's just storage, old medical equipment gathering dust, and a few administrative offices that are only used during the day. My job is to do my rounds, check the doors, make sure no one is where they shouldn't be, and keep the peace. It's usually quiet, almost too quiet. The first time I heard it, I was on my third round of the night, about 2 a.m. I was walking down the long, dim hallway on the third floor of the old wing. The air is always colder up there, a sort of sterile, stale cold that gets into your bones. The lights flicker sometimes and the floorboards groan under your weight, but I'm used to it. That night I heard a whisper. It was faint, like a rustle of paper, but it was there. It was a man's voice, and it said, "Michael." I stopped dead in my tracks. My name. I looked around. The hallway was empty. The doors were all closed and locked. I figured it was just the building settling, or maybe the old heating system. The mind can play tricks on you when you're alone in a place like that for so long. I shined my flashlight down the hall, saw nothing, and kept going. I didn't hear it again on that round. The next night it happened again. I was on the third floor near the old surgery rooms. The voice was a little clearer this time, a definite, "Michael." It sounded like it was right behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. Nothing. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I started walking faster. This wasn't the building. This was something else. I felt an undeniable presence following me, just out of sight. Over the next few weeks, the whisper became my constant companion. It would start up just as I entered the old wing. "Michael." It would follow me down the halls, a quiet, insistent murmur. I would hear it as I passed the old patient rooms, the nurse's station, the abandoned labs. I started talking to my supervisor, trying to pass it off as being tired or overworked. He just laughed it off and told me to get some more sleep. He didn't believe me, and I couldn't blame him. How could I explain that an invisible presence was stalking me? But then the whisper changed. It wasn't just my name anymore. It started to say other things. One night, as I was passing the old children's ward, I heard it. "Michael, you didn't call your mother." I froze. I had been meaning to call her all week, but I kept forgetting. How could it know that? My blood ran cold. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. "She's worried about you, Michael. She's so sad." It was a childlike voice now, high-pitched and full of sorrow. The chill turned to a deep, bone-chilling fear. I ran the rest of my round, the whisper echoing behind me. Sad. So sad. The next night was even worse. As I walked past the old maternity wing, the whisper came back, but it was a woman's voice this time. Soft and gentle, but full of pain. "Michael, you shouldn't have been so mean to her. You made her cry." My heart sank. She was talking about my ex-girlfriend, Sarah. We had a terrible fight a year ago, and I said some things I deeply regretted. I hadn't seen her since. The voice knew. It knew my secrets. It knew the moments of regret and shame I kept buried deep inside. It was no longer a ghost. It was a parasite feeding on my past. I started to get panic attacks on my rounds. Every footstep felt heavy, every shadow seemed to move. I would turn a corner and think I saw a fleeting shape, a flash of white in the darkness. I'd yell at it to stop, but it would just laugh. A quiet, dry, rattling laugh that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I started to refuse to go into the old wing. I would just do a quick check of the main doors and then stay in the newer, well-lit parts of the building. My supervisor got angry. He said I wasn't doing my job. He threatened to fire me. One night, the whisper didn't wait for me to go to the old wing. I was in the main lobby checking the doors. My headset crackled and I heard a voice, sharp and clear. "Michael, remember the fire?" I dropped my flashlight. The fire? The one that took my sister? I was only 7. The voice continued, a new distorted tone. It was my sister's voice, high and filled with terror. It described the smell of the smoke, the feeling of the heat, the sound of the crackling wood. It described how I was holding her hand, and then I let go. I didn't let go, I thought. I didn't. But the voice insisted, describing the exact moment I turned away to save myself. "You let go, Michael. You let go." The voice broke into a sound of pure agony. Tears streamed down my face. I collapsed on the floor, shaking. The lobby lights flickered and died. All I could hear was that terrible, terrible whisper, louder now and closer than it had ever been. "You let me go, Michael. I couldn't take it anymore." I quit that night. I didn't even pick up my last paycheck. I just left the keys on the desk and walked out into the cold night air. I got a new job, a new life, but sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, a sudden coldness will creep in and I'll hear it, a faint whisper just on the edge of my hearing. Michael, and I know it's still out there, waiting. Story 2. The Guest on the 7th Floor. The hotel I work at, the Grand Valencia, is a beautiful old place. Ornate lobbies, polished brass elevators, and long dark hallways that hold a lot of history. My job is the night audit. I'm responsible for making sure everything balances out, checking in late guests and dealing with any issues that come up. It's a lonely job mostly, but I enjoy the solitude. The hotel is big and on any given night it's mostly empty. The upper floors, especially the 7th floor, are almost always deserted. The 7th floor, in fact, is out of service for a large-scale renovation that has been put on hold for 2 years. No one is supposed to be up there. The first time I saw it, I was doing my nightly walkthrough. I had to go up to the top floor to check the fire doors and make sure everything was secure. I took the grand old service elevator up to the 7th floor. As I stepped out, the air felt thick and heavy. A single light was on at the end of the long hallway. It was coming from a room, a small sliver of light beneath the door of room 713. My heart started to pound. This shouldn't be happening. I checked the guest manifest. No one was checked into room 713. No one was on this floor at all. I walked slowly down the hallway, the sound of my shoes echoing off the walls. I knocked on the door of 713. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone in there?" No answer. The light remained on. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I didn't have a key to that room. The master key for the floor had been taken off the main ring for some reason, and the manager said to just make a note of any issues. I made a mental note of it and headed back down, my skin crawling with unease. The next night I saw it again. The light was on in room 7113. This time I was more annoyed than scared. Someone must have gotten up here, or maybe a worker left something on. I went back up. I could hear a faint shuffling sound from inside the room. I put my ear to the door. I could hear it more clearly now. It was like something was being dragged across the carpet, a slow scraping sound. I knocked loudly, but the shuffling stopped. I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck and I spun around. The hallway was empty. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I left and went straight back to the front desk. I started checking the surveillance footage. The cameras showed no one getting on or off the elevator on the 7th floor. I checked the stairs too, no one. The footage showed me getting out of the elevator, walking down the hall, and then me leaving. But what about the light? I replayed the tape. The light was on when I got there and it was on when I left. But there was no one on the floor to turn it on. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The third night I decided to take things into my own hands. I went up to the 7th floor again, armed with a new key I got from the manager telling him a guest was on the 7th floor. The light was on again. I slowly put the key in the lock, my hand shaking. The lock clicked and I pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was made, everything looked normal, but there was a small dusty child's doll sitting on the pillow. It had a porcelain face, cracked and yellowed, with one glass eye missing. I had to force myself to breathe. The light was coming from a single lamp on the bedside table. I walked over and turned it off. I picked up the doll and it felt heavy in my hands. A wave of sorrow and fear washed over me. I put it on the table and left, locking the door behind me. The next night, the light was on again. My heart sank. I went back up to the 7th floor and the light from room 713 was a beacon in the darkness. I opened the door and the doll was back on the pillow. But this time it was lying on its side. Its one remaining glass eye seemed to stare at me, a silent accusation. A faint sweet smell like old perfume hung in the air. I backed out of the room, slamming the door shut. I ran down the stairs and back to the front desk. I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next night I found a little note stuck to the front desk. It was written in a childish scrawl on a piece of hotel stationery. It said, "She's not lonely anymore. She has a friend." I knew instantly what it meant. I ran to the 7th floor, but the light wasn't on. The door to room 713 was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and the light wasn't coming from the lamp. It was coming from the bathroom, where the light had been left on. I walked slowly into the room. The bed was unmade. The sheets were twisted and turned as if someone had been struggling. I looked at the bathroom door. A strange sense of dread filled me. I pushed it open. The doll was there, sitting on the edge of the tub. It was looking at something. I slowly followed its gaze. I looked in the mirror and I saw a reflection that was not my own. It was a little girl with long dark hair and one missing eye. She was holding a knife. She was smiling. I'm no longer an auditor at the Grand Valencia. I got a new job far away. But every night I still dream of that room, and I always see that girl in the mirror holding the knife, waiting for me. Story 3. The Crossroads gas station. Working the graveyard shift at a gas station is a special kind of lonely. Mine is on a 2-lane highway miles from the nearest town. It's mostly trucks that stop by. The hours between 2 and 4 a.m. are the quietest. The only sound is the hum of the fridge and the occasional crackle of the radio. One night I saw a car pull up to pump 3. It was an old beat-up sedan the color of a bruised plum. A man got out, a regular-looking guy in a baseball cap. He filled his tank, came inside, paid with cash, and left. Normal transaction. An hour later I saw the same car pull up. I squinted. The exact same car. The same rusted fender, the same broken headlight. My stomach did a little flip. Another man got out. He was different though. He was tall and thin, and his movements were jerky like a puppet on strings. His eyes were wide and seemed to stare at me through the window. He didn't seem to blink. He came inside, paid with a card that he had to swipe 3 times, and left without a word. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of unease. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe there was more than one beat-up plum-colored sedan in the world. Maybe a family was on a long road trip and they were all taking turns driving. I tried to focus on stocking the shelves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. An hour later, I heard the familiar rumble of the car. I looked up and there it was again, pulling up to the same pump. The same car, this time a woman got out. She was dressed in an old white dress. Her hair was a mess. She was pale, almost ghostly. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if she was underwater. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and her lips were pulled back in a thin, tight smile. She didn't pump any gas. She just stood there staring at the pump. My heart was pounding. I waited. She eventually came inside, walked to the counter, and just stared at me. She didn't say anything. I finally asked her if she needed something. She just smiled wider, a chilling, vacant smile, and then walked out. I watched her get back in the car. It sat there for a minute, then pulled away, turning down a different road. The rest of the night was a blur. The car kept coming back. Every time it was a different person, but it was always the same car. There was a man with no hair and no eyebrows, a child with pale, vacant eyes, an old woman whose face was covered in a web of wrinkles. Each one was more unsettling than the last. They would all come inside and do something odd. The man with no hair just stared at the lottery tickets for 10 minutes. The child just pointed to the candy bars. The old woman just smiled and hummed a creepy song. They were all different, but they were all the same. They all seemed to have an empty, haunted look in their eyes, as if they were just puppets, and something else was pulling their strings. I was huddled behind the counter, my whole body shaking when the final one came. I saw the familiar rusty sedan pull up to the pump. I didn't even look up. I just stared at my hands. I heard the door open, the bell jingle. I knew who it was or what it was. I forced myself to look up. Standing on the other side of the counter was me. A distorted version of me. My eyes were too big, my mouth too wide. My face was pale and gaunt, and my hair was greasy and unkempt. I stared into my own eyes and I saw pure terror. My reflection on the other side of the counter slowly reached out a hand. It was cold and bony. It put a crumpled bill on the counter. It was a $20 bill. I took it and my reflection just stared at me, its hollow eyes filled with an unbearable sadness. I backed away. The reflection just smiled and backed out of the store. I watched it walk to the car and get in. The car started up. The engine roared and the car sped away, disappearing into the darkness of the highway. I leaned against the counter, my legs shaking. I felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sense of horror. What was that? Why did it look like me? Was I next? I was just about to call the police when I heard the engine of the car again. It was closer this time. My blood ran cold. The car pulled up to the door, but it didn't stop. It just kept going, smashing through the glass doors. I screamed as I was thrown back, landing hard on the ground. The car stopped. The driver door opened. The man with no hair got out, followed by the child and then the old woman. They all just stared at me. Their faces were expressionless except for a deep, terrible emptiness in their eyes. They looked like they had been waiting for me all along. The last thing I saw was the child raising a small bony hand pointing at me. And then they were all standing on me. I don't know what happened after that. I just woke up in the hospital. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. They said I was found in the wreckage of the gas station with the car sitting on the counter. There was no sign of anyone else. The police said it was a robbery. I didn't tell them the real story. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw, and sometimes when I'm alone in my room, I can still hear the sound of the car engine getting closer. Story 4. The Unseen Programmer. I'm a data center technician. I work the night shift. It's just me and the humming server racks, the flashing lights, and the cold, dry air. It's a huge building, mostly underground. A concrete bunker filled with billions of dollars worth of computers. My job is to monitor the systems, replace hard drives, and make sure everything is running smoothly. It's a solitary job. The only things that move are the little green and red lights on the server racks. One night around 3 a.m., I noticed something strange on my main monitor. It was a diagnostics monitor, showing the health of the servers. It was just a bunch of numbers and letters, but it was moving too fast. It was like someone was typing something in. I figured it was a bug in the system, a rogue script. I ran a diagnostic, but it came back clean. I shrugged and went back to my work, but then it happened again. On a different monitor. This time the letters and numbers started to make a word. "Hello," it said. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I must be hallucinating. I looked at the monitor again. It was still there. "Hello, Mike, my name." I jumped back, my hands trembling. I was the only person in the building. There was no one else here. The security footage would confirm it. So who was typing, and how did they know my name? I typed back into the system, "Who is this?" My fingers felt numb as I wrote the words. The response was instantaneous. "A friend." The words flashed on the screen. "Do you want to play a game?" My mind was racing. Was it a hacker, a prank? I ran a full system scan, checked every single log file, every port, nothing. There was no sign of an outside presence. The code was being written from inside the system, but it was not being written by a human. The code started to ask me personal questions. "How is your son?" it asked. My son David had been sick with a cough for a week. How did it know that? "He'll be okay," it typed. "Just give him some more tea." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. Something that had access to information it shouldn't have. It was inside the network and it was watching me. I tried to trace the source of the code. I followed the digital trail, the IP addresses, the server logs. They all led to a single server in a sealed-off section of the data center. Server 7B. That server had been disconnected from the network for a year. It was offline. It was just sitting there, a dead lump of metal and wires. So how was it sending me messages? I looked at the camera footage. I saw myself, standing in front of the monitors, a small, scared figure in the vast, cold room. The monitors were flashing with the words that were a living, breathing entity trapped in the wires. The code started to get more malicious. It started to make threats. "If you don't do what I say, something bad will happen to your family. You don't want to see what happens when I get out." I started to have a full-blown panic attack. I felt like I was being watched from every corner of the room. I felt a cold breath on my neck and I spun around, but there was nothing there. I knew it was close. I knew it was trying to get out. The lights in the data center started to flicker, then they went out completely. The emergency lights came on, casting a sickly red glow over the room. I was plunged into a nightmare of red and black. The monitors were still on, glowing with an evil, pulsating light. The code was there. It was all over the monitors now. A single, unified text, "I'm coming for you, Mike." The voice was no longer just on the screen. It was in my head. It was in the hum of the servers. It was in the cold air. I looked up. I saw a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. It was a distorted human shape. It was made of pure static and light. It was coming for me. I ran. I didn't stop. I ran all the way out of the building. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if the lights ever came back on. I just know that I never went back. But sometimes when my phone gets a strange text message, or when my computer glitches, I can still hear it. The whisper. I'm still here, Mike. Story 5. The Silent Traveler. I'm the night watchman at the city's Natural History Museum. The nights are long and quiet. My favorite part of the job is patrolling the new exhibit on ancient Egypt. There's a beautiful, massive sarcophagus in the center of the room. It's made of heavy stone covered in carvings and hieroglyphs. It's supposed to be empty. It was discovered in a tomb that had been looted. The curators swear there is nothing inside it. The first night, as I was doing my rounds, I noticed a small piece of dust on the lid of the sarcophagus. It was a long, thin, brown piece of lint. I brushed it off, thinking nothing of it. The next night, I was back in the room and I saw another piece of dust. It was in a different place. It was a little darker this time. I looked closer. It was on the floor, about an inch from where I brushed the last one off. A chill ran down my spine. The sarcophagus hadn't moved. The exhibit was sealed. The doors were locked. No one could have been here. Over the next few nights, I started to notice other things. A small scratch on the side of the sarcophagus that wasn't there before. A speck of dust in the shape of a finger. The movements were so subtle, so slight, that I thought I was losing my mind. But I knew I wasn't. The sarcophagus was moving. I decided to test it. I took a small piece of clear tape and stuck it to the floor, just at the corner of the sarcophagus. I marked it with a pen. I came back the next night and the sarcophagus was an inch away from the tape. My heart was pounding. It was moving. On its own, I couldn't tell anyone. They would think I was insane. I started to set up cameras on my phone, hiding them in the exhibits. The footage showed nothing. I would just see a black screen with an occasional flash of light, and then, in the morning, the sarcophagus would be a little bit further from the tape. The movements were too small to be picked up on the camera. The silence of the room started to feel like a living thing. I could hear a faint scratching sound coming from inside the sarcophagus. It sounded like nails on stone, a low guttural grinding. It was trying to get out. I started to run from the room, my legs shaking. I would stand in the hallway and just listen. The scratching would stop and I would hear a soft thud. I knew what it was. It was the sound of the sarcophagus moving. The scratching got louder and more frantic. It sounded like something was clawing at the inside of the stone. I could feel the vibrations through the floor. I stood in the doorway, staring at the sarcophagus. I could hear something heavy inside, sliding back and forth. I thought I could hear a muffled groan. It was in there, trapped, and it wanted out. I couldn't sleep. The scratching sound was in my head all the time. I was going insane. One night I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was in there. I slowly walked to the sarcophagus, my heart pounding in my chest. I placed my hands on the lid and I felt a faint warmth coming from the stone. I pushed. The lid was incredibly heavy. I pushed again, harder this time. I heard a scraping sound and the lid moved just an inch. A smell filled the room. It was the smell of old dust, dry air, and something else. Something rotten. Something ancient and dead. I pushed the lid open a little more. I shined my flashlight inside. It was dark. I pushed the lid back and I saw a shape. It was a small, desiccated hand. It was brown and shriveled with long yellow nails. It was moving. A small, bony finger twitched. I screamed and backed away, stumbling over the exhibits. I fell to the ground, my body shaking with fear. The hand moved again. I watched as it slowly, painstakingly clawed its way out of the sarcophagus. It pulled itself up onto the lid and I could see the rest of the body. It was a mummy. It was covered in rotting bandages. Its eyes were two black holes. It was looking at me. It slowly raised its arm and it pointed a long, bony finger at me. I couldn't move. It was trying to talk, but all I could hear was a dry, rasping sound. It took a step toward me. I knew what it wanted. It wanted to show me what it had done to my boss. I had to run. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I never went back. I don't know what happened to the mummy. I don't know if it got out, but every night I can still hear it. The scratching, the sound of a hand on stone, the silent traveler, trapped in a stone tomb waiting to get out. Story 6. The Playful Ghosts. The warehouse I work in is massive, a monument to a past industrial age. It's mostly empty now, used for storage. There's a section of the warehouse that's sealed off. It's a large concrete room with a single steel door welded shut. There was an industrial accident a long time ago. They say a family of 5 was killed there, a mother, father, and 3 young children. They sealed it off. I'm the night foreman. My job is to make sure everything is secure. I do my rounds, check the locks, and make sure no one is in the building. It's a lonely job, but I'm used to it. One night I was walking past the sealed room and I heard something. It was a faint sound like a child giggling. It was so faint I thought I imagined it. I stopped, but the sound was gone. I shrugged it off and kept going. The next night I heard it again. It was a little clearer this time. It was the sound of children playing. I could hear a faint bouncing sound like a ball. I could hear whispers. They were coming from inside the sealed room. I pressed my ear to the cold steel door. The sounds were louder now. I could hear a child's voice, high and happy, saying, "You're it. You can't catch me." It was a game of tag. My skin crawled. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. How could I hear that? I was told the room was sealed. Over the next few nights, the sounds became a regular thing. The children were always playing. I could hear them. I could hear the sound of a small red ball bouncing off the walls. I could hear them singing a little song. It was a beautiful, innocent sound, but it was coming from a place of death. It was coming from a place where a family had died. It was a sound that shouldn't be. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. I started to have nightmares. I would see the children, pale and ghostly, running and playing in the warehouse. They would run right through the racks of shelves and disappear into the darkness. I would wake up in a cold sweat. One night, the sounds changed. They weren't playful anymore. They were angry. I could hear a faint crying, a small, sad voice. "I'm scared. I want to go home." Then I heard a woman's voice. It was soft and gentle, but full of sorrow. "It's okay, baby. We're all here. We're all together." I felt a tear fall down my cheek. I knew they were trapped. I knew they were in pain. I wanted to help them. I wanted to tell them it was going to be okay. Then the woman's voice became distorted, full of hatred. "We're waiting for you. We're waiting to play." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a game. It was a trap. I backed away from the door. I could hear the sounds of the ball bouncing, but it wasn't a playful sound anymore. It was a loud, frantic banging. "You're it," a voice shrieked. It was a little boy's voice. "We're going to get you," a little girl screamed. The sounds were getting louder. I could hear the banging of the ball against the steel door. It was trying to get out. I ran to my office. I locked the door behind me. I sat in my chair, shaking. The sounds were so loud now. I could hear them from my office. The banging of the ball, the screams of the children. It was a cacophony of terror. I heard something else now. I could hear something scratching at the door. It was a child's voice, but it was not playful. It was full of anger and malice. "Let us out," it screamed. "Let us out." I curled up in a ball under my desk, covering my ears. I could hear the scratching sound on the metal door. I could hear the banging of the ball. I could hear the whispers. "We're going to get you." I don't know what happened after that. I just woke up in the morning. The scratching was gone. The banging was gone. The sounds of the children were gone. The steel door to the sealed room was still welded shut, but there was a small red handprint on the door, and the paint was peeling around it. I quit that day. I couldn't stay. But sometimes when I'm alone, I can still hear it. The sound of children playing, The sound of a bouncing ball. The sound of a little boy's voice saying, "You're it," and I know they're still waiting for me. Story 7, The Lighthouse Ghost. I've been a lighthouse keeper for 10 years. It's a lonely life, but I love the sea. I love the sound of the waves, the smell of the salt, the solitude. It's just me and the sea and the stars. I get a radio signal from time to time, but mostly it's just the same old thing. One night I got a distress signal. It was a woman's voice. She was crying. "Help us," she screamed. "We're lost. We can't find the light." She gave me a name for her ship, the Selene. I checked my radar. There was no ship called the Selene. I checked my logbooks. No ship by that name had ever been in the area. I tried to hail the ship, but I only got static. I tried again. The woman's voice came back, more frantic this time. "We can see your light, but we can't reach you. The fog is too thick. We're being pulled away." My blood ran cold. The fog. There was no fog. The night was clear. The sky was filled with a million stars. I looked out the window. The sea was calm. The fog was only on her end. I tried to tell her that I would get help, but she just kept screaming.
"Help us, help us."
Her voice was starting to sound distorted, like a broken record. "They're coming. They're coming for us." A deep guttural voice came on the radio, a man's voice, and it said, "We're all here. We're all waiting." The radio went dead. I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling for help on the radio, but I couldn't get a signal. I was alone. I looked out the window again. I could feel something. A cold, damp feeling in the air. The stars were starting to fade. The sky was turning gray. A thick white fog was rolling in, obscuring the sea, swallowing the sky. It was a beautiful, ethereal fog, but it was also terrifying. It was the fog the woman had been talking about. I turned on my light, but it was useless. The fog was too thick. I couldn't see anything. I went back to my radio trying to get a signal, but all I could hear was static. I went back to the window and I saw something in the fog. It was a ship. It was a massive old sailing ship with tattered sails and broken masts. It was moving toward the lighthouse, but it wasn't on the water. It was floating in the air. It was a ghost ship. It was the Selene. I could see figures on the deck. They were distorted, ghostly figures, and they were all looking at me. They were waving. They were smiling. The woman from the radio was there, and she was smiling too. But her smile was not a happy one. It was a smile of pure malice. I backed away from the window. I felt a cold touch on my back, and I spun around. There was a man standing behind me. He was wearing an old-fashioned sailor's uniform. His skin was pale and translucent. He looked like he had been underwater for 100 years. He just stared at me with empty black eyes. He didn't say a word. He just pointed out the window. The ghost ship was right outside the lighthouse, and the ghostly figures were all waving at me, their distorted faces smiling. I could hear the woman's voice again. It was in my head. "We're all here now," she whispered. "We're all waiting for you to join us." I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I looked at the man. He was smiling now, a wide, horrible smile, and his teeth were black and rotten. He took a step toward me. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. I ran up the stairs, past the light. I ran down to the base of the lighthouse. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I was trapped. I looked out the small window on the door, and I saw the ghosts. They were all there, floating outside the lighthouse, their eyes wide and empty, their hands outstretched. They were waiting for me. I screamed. I don't know what happened after that. I just remember waking up. The door was open. I was in my bed. The lighthouse was silent. The sea was calm. The sun was shining. But there was a small handwritten note on my pillow. It said, "The sea has claimed its prize. Welcome home." I quit my job that day. I couldn't stay. But sometimes when I'm alone in my room, I can still hear the sound of the sea. I can still hear the distant cry of the Selene. And I know they're still waiting for me.